Hey everybody, welcome back to Mobile Production. I'm your host, Mike Bodine, and today we're going to talk about color grading your mobile footage to get more professional looking videos and expand your skills. Now this is something I've struggled with time and time again. We are all here to shoot mobile content, but if you really want to up your game and raise your professionalism, you want to learn how to color grade. Surprisingly, this can be very easy if you have your settings set right the first time. This process, of course, is very subjective, but I just want to give you guys a good start to color grade your mobile footage. No matter what program you guys use, you want to give your settings your top priority. Most of you know that 95% of the time I use the Beastcam app. And the reason I use this app is because I love it, the interface is great, and it's just the app I chose to use. But any third-party apps will work just fine, as long as they let you control things like white balance, ISO, and shutter speed. White balance should be one of the very first things you set. Now, if you're like me and don't have one of those fancy white balance cards that are crazy expensive for what they are, guess what? We were blessed with these things called eyes. If you set your white balance by looking at your actual mobile screen and then looking at the scene you're shooting, just try to get them as close as possible. That's really what white balance is, just making it look exactly what your eyes see. And you can do fancier things in post if you want to go for a stylized look. Bottom line is, if you have your white balance properly set, you will set yourself up for success when you move on to the editing process. ISO is your main setting where you can control how bright and how dark your video is. With third-party apps like Beastcam and Beastgrip Pro, we have the ability to control our ISO and change it as needed. Now typically we want to keep this ISO as low as possible. On traditional cameras, you have the ability to turn up your ISO higher, and while that can give you more light in your scene, it also can introduce more noise. And that's especially true when it comes to mobile devices. And that's because we have such a small sensor and it's really hard to get a lot of light in. My recommended settings for mobile is 34 ISO. Now if you're in a pinch, you can go up to 200, but you are going to introduce more noise and a lower quality of video. In dark environments, you will find it's almost impossible to shoot at 34 ISO. But that's when you need to get creative, and by getting creative, you could pick a different area to shoot at where the lighting is better. You could bring your own light, or you could just film altogether at a different time and location. Turning up your ISO under these conditions should never be an option. In bright environments, you will find that using ISO 34 will make your image look very bright or overexposed. This is where you want to introduce things like ND filters. Do not change your ISO. You want to keep that set the same. Now, using ND filters can help you tone down that image. They kind of work like sunglasses on your phone, and depending on how bright it is outside, you'll need to get an ND filter that's appropriate for your time. So they typically make, and the things I use are VNDs, which stand for Variable Neutral Density Filters. So those usually come in varieties of 2 to 5 stops and also 6 to 9 stops. So I typically use those a lot. And depending on the situation, they really help you out, but always keep that ISO at 34. Here are some good starting points based on my opinion for different scenarios. That half hour of orange glow before sunrise, you can use ND 2 or 3. For sunrise, use ND 4 or 5. Sunny afternoon, ND 5, 6, or 7. That hour of blue and orange before sunset, ND 3, 4, or 5. And at sunset, ND 2, 3, or 4. And at night, good luck using the ND filter. Holy shit, it's a white tundra of snow and ice with the sun blazing down without a cloud in the sky. Use an ND 9. As much time as we spent on the ISO section, I want to make the shutter speed sections short and sweet. Basically what you need to do is double your shutter speed to whatever your FPS rate is, which stands for frames per second. Here's some examples. 24 frames per second, your shutter should be 1/48. If you're using 30 frames a second, your shutter should be 1/60. At 60 frames per second, make your shutter speed 1/120. This process helps you process your video in the way the human eye was supposed to see it. It makes things sharp when they are still, and it adds a natural motion blur to moving objects. Now let's go to our second section, color grading mobile footage. Since we are all big fans of creating our content on mobile devices, I'm going to show you how to edit on another mobile app called Lumafusion. So here we are in Lumafusion, and once we get Lumafusion loaded and we get our clips in our timeline, we're ready to go. Now for this example, I do have the graded footage at the bottom here, and on the top I put the same clips just without any grading on it. So what you're seeing right here is a clip from my studio. This is straight out of my iPhone 12 Pro Max and the Beastcam app. My settings, of course, are ISO 34. My shutter is 148 because my frame rate is 24 frames. And then I set my white balance accordingly. And this is just a little jump cut right here. So this is what this looks like. I'm going to show you 3 clips total. This is the second clip. Now this is a much nicer clip straight out of camera. So this is from also the Beastcam app, ISO 34. The shutter is at 120 because I filmed this at 60 frames a second. And I'm using a variable ND filter based on just before sunset. So that looks pretty good straight out of camera. And here again, this is also some railroad B-roll footage that I shot with the same lens, the anamorphic 1.33 Mark II from Beastgrip. And I am using a variable ND filter on this as well. So this day is a little more cloudy than the day before, but we're going to go back and start with the original clip here, and I'm going to show you what I do to grade it. Okay, now I'm going to show you what it looks like with my final graded clips. We'll just turn this top layer off, and there you go. That's what it looks like. I'll show you what I did here. We will double click on this clip here. It'll take you in. For these purposes, I used vignette, and I also used original. So now for grading purposes, we're just going to turn off the vignette for now, and you're going to see what that looks like. I clearly just used the vignette to focus more on me and kind of less distractions from the outside, so you can see kind of what that does. It kind of puts the focal point more at your head than the rest of the scene. So we'll turn that off and we'll open up original. And as you can see in original, the things that I adjusted. So the things that I adjusted was the brightness. The brightness is at 15 or 0.15. The very first thing I usually mess with though is gamma. Gamma is one of the most important things. So you can see down here, it's set right now at 1.64. So normally it's back here. And then of course the brightness is back there. So that looks a lot closer to the original iPhone footage. So we're gonna set this back up and you kind of look for it. And I had it at 1.64. So we're gonna get there, right there. And now I'm gonna crank my brightness up to 0.15. And that's where we were at. So in addition to those two pieces, I also dropped the saturation down. So that takes a little bit of the redness out, as you can see right there. And then I also toned down the highlights because the highlights make it even brighter. So I toned those down a little bit. And occasionally I will lower the shadow amount a little bit and then add a little bit of blue, in this case cyan, to the image. So it just has the minor, little, you can see it's a little more red there, and you tone it down a little bit, and there you go. So that's pretty much how I grade it. That's all there is to it. And then once you do that, you can turn your vignette back on, and there I think looks pretty good. I'll show you what it looks like full screen. So that is the final, and I'll go back and show you what that piece looks like unedited. So yeah, there it is, not graded. Looks like phone footage. I mean, it's good footage. The quality's there. It's pretty high quality using the 4K settings. But you just need that extra little step to go in there and really make it look a lot more professional. So I believe I did that with this. So now we're going to move on to the second clip. And here we are in the second clip. Now this is the edited version. I did a lot less work on these two clips than I did on, of course, my clip down here. These two clips were pretty solid from the get-go, but the main thing you'll notice that I changed was I made the colors a little less harsh. Usually when you're shooting from your phone, the colors are very rich and sometimes a little bit too punchy. So I kind of toned that down to give that little bit of a film look to it. So that's what that looks like, and that's what that piece looks like here. We'll look at the settings real quick. There's no vignetting on this. There is just the original. The things I did is I lowered the contrast a little bit, lowered the saturation, lowered the vibrance, and lowered the shadow amount. And I cranked the gamma down just a little bit. So going down this way, you can see it'll become more washed out. So we just wanted to tweak that just a little bit. So that's how I do it. And now I'm going to go back up, and I hope you guys learned a little bit. So once again, color grading your footage is all subjective. It all depends on what you like, what you think looks good, and what you think looks more professional. So these are my recommended settings. I hope they help you out a lot, and we'll see you again next time. And that's all I got.